In this video, you will learn everything that you need to know to be able to translate your React application into multiple languages using i18next. I'm going to show you literally the simplest way to do this. I'm going to walk you through the entire process step by step, and by the end of this video, you'll be able to take this and go apply it to your own applications and literally translate them into any language that you want. So stick around and watch until the end of the video because I promise you, you are going to learn a lot. And by the way, if you're here, if you're watching this video, I can only assume that you're interested in learning about React, which is great because I have Project React, which is a course where you literally get taught how to build a big and complex application with React as a total beginner. You don't need to know anything about React beforehand. Literally everything is going to be taught in the course, and I take the complex task of building a big project with React, I break it down in a way that's super organized and accessible to a total beginner, and I make this super simple. If you're interested, I highly recommend it. It'll be the first link in the description down below. All right, cool. So let's begin. So here in front of us, we have the official documentation of React i18next. This is going to be the package that we're going to be using to essentially translate our React application. If you don't know, i18next is a package here. If I just take it and go to Google and just Google i18next, this is a package that is available for JavaScript, and it allows applications to be translated into multiple languages. And the thing that we're using here, React i18next, is essentially the React bindings for that to be able to easily use it inside of our own React application. So you're going to want to go here to the official documentation, and you're going to want to go to the quick start tab under the guides section over here. We're going to take the simple approach. We're not going to spend time getting confused with all of these different options that you can have. The simple approach in the quick start, along with what I'm going to show you in this video, is going to be enough to teach you everything that you need to know to be able to take this and directly port this to your own application and get started with translations with internalization right away. Cool. So once you're here, you're going to follow the quick start. And the first thing that we have to do is install the required dependencies. So that is going to be React i18next, the React bindings for i18next, and the actual i18next library itself. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to come here to my actual VSCode, open up the terminal and do pnpn add, and then install these dependencies like so. After that's done installing, we're going to go back here to the documentation and we're going to scroll and go here to configure i18next. And what I'm going to do here, this is telling us that we have to create a new file called i18n.js. We're going to be using TS because we're using TypeScript, and we're going to put it here inside of our folder structure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this code over here and actually copy all of this and just directly paste it into my own application. So I'm going to come back here to VS Code, open up the editor over here, come here, and I'm going to make a new folder here called utils. And inside of this, I'm going to make i18n.ts like so. And here we can actually close the terminal and we can paste all of the contents of the file that we got from the official documentation. Now, the reason why I put this file inside of its own utils folder and not just directly in the root of the project like is suggested here in the documentation is because usually in the documentation, they tell you like the simplest part without trying to complicate anything. But in my videos, I always like to show you how you would do this in a real project. And chances are you're going to have more utilities in this project, and they would all go inside of this utils folder because this over here is a utility. It's the internalization utility, and it's going to go alongside other utilities. So having its own folder makes a lot of sense. And now with this, if we just look a little bit at this file, we're first importing i18n from the official i18next library that is not React specific. And then we're importing the init React i18next from the React specific library like so. And then we're creating here an object for our resources. This is going to be the actual translation keys of all of our languages. So for example, here we have English, and then we have French, and we have here one translation key. Welcome to React, that is going to be translated to this. And then welcome to React, this is the same key because the keys are always going to be the same. This is going to have the actual French translation, which says Bienvenue à React et React i18next. I'm actually fluent in French if you didn't know about this, so I can perfectly read and understand this. Then if you scroll down, we have here, we're using the i18n, which remember comes directly from the JavaScript non-React specific library, and we're calling .use on it, and we're passing the init React i18next, which comes directly from React i18next. And here, as you can see, we have helpful comments that actually tell us what that is. And then we're calling the .init function, and we're passing it a configuration object, which takes in our resources, and then the actual language, which we set here as English. And here you can see there's a comment that says language to use. More information here. In this case, the language is currently hard-coded, but you can actually, I believe if you follow this link over here, Actually, no, it's this one over here. If you want to actually change the language dynamically, so we're going to copy this, go back here, open a new tab and go here. You can follow this guide over here to actually change the language dynamically in your application. We're not going to do that. We're going to keep things simple. We're just going to hard code this to English, and then we'll be able to hard code this to French to actually see our translation keys actually working in action in our React application. And then over here at the bottom, we have this piece of code, which we set to false because we are using React, and React, as the comment says here, already protects you from cross-site scripting attacks. If you're using something that doesn't protect you by default, you might want to revisit this, but in our case, because we are using React, this is totally fine. And again, this entire code comes directly from the actual documentation of React i18next. And then once we have this configured, the only thing that we have to do to actually connect this to our React application is come here to our Explorer and go to main.tsx. If you're following this repository, which by the way, this entire code is going to be available on GitHub. It'll be linked in the description. You can just come here and import everything that we're exporting in this file, which is only this default export. So we're exporting i18n. We just have to import it over here, not do anything with it. Just the fact alone of importing it is going to be enough. So we're going to come here, make a new line, and we're going to do import i18n, if I can type, from utils/i18n like so. And I do believe in this project I set up aliases, so we can also do this, or we can leave it as a period. It's completely up to us, right? It really depends how you set up your entire project. Just by doing this, we've imported all of this, and now we can directly use these translation strings inside of our React application. And actually, now that we're going to be using them, I want to make a little change here. I don't like how these are actual strings and sentences with like actual spaces and capitals and such. I would rather put camel case notation for my strings, just because it makes it a little bit easier, because we're going to be writing these keys in code to actually get the translated values of each specific key. So what I would do instead is, instead of welcome to React, I would make this welcome message like so. And then I would copy the same thing over here. We're going to do welcome message, and already you can see that this is a little bit cleaner. In our code, we're actually just going to call translate and then this key, and this is automatically going to give us whatever value we have for the specific language that we configured over here, which is going to be English in our case. And then to actually use this, we need to go to a component. So here in the Explorer, I have the app.tsx file, which is a simple component. What we have to first do is we have to access the actual function. It's called the T function, that is going to allow us to pass it a key, one of these keys over here, and actually get and receive the actual translated value as a result of calling that function. And we're going to do that the simple way. We're going to do that with a hook, because we are working in modern React and everything is hook based in modern React. So we're going to come here and do const and then T, and that is going to be equal to useTranslation. And that, let me just refresh my TS server because it doesn't register that I installed this library. Translation from React i18next, right? This is the React bindings of this library, which gives us this hook, which gives us access to T, and we can directly use T inside of this component. So let's come here, let's remove this text, and let's call it here. We're going to do T. And then we're going to pass it the actual key that we have inside of our object, which, as you can see, is welcome message like so, right? This key over here, you pass it as a string, and it has to match one of these keys over here, or else it's not going to translate anything, and it's just going to return the actual key. So with this, now let's come here to our terminal. Let's do pnpm dev to actually run this in development mode. And then let's go here to our browser. This is the first section. And there we go. Right off the bat, it is not working. Aha, I realized why it's not working. I should have caught this earlier, but I didn't. But it's good that we caught it on video, because now I get to show you how you would approach debugging this. So over here in my editor, if I close the terminal and go here to main.tsx, you're going to see that where we actually imported i18n, it's saying that this is actually unused. If I hover over this, it's saying that this is declared, but its value is never read. I should not have imported i18n from this file. Instead, I should have imported the entire file. So instead of doing this, all I had to do was come here and do this, and we're instead going to then import the entire file, and that should fix our problem. If you go back here, there we go. Just doing that change fixed our problem. Now we have welcome to React and React i18next. And remember, in our code, in our component, all that we're passing is this key over here. We're not passing the actual string. which means that the fact that we see the string over here means that our translation through i18next is actually working, because using this key, it's able to go here inside of the resources inside of each language, and it's able to actually find the value of this specific language. And to even prove this to you a little bit further, let's come here to our language and let's change this now to French, save it, and then go back. And there we go. Now we have the French translation of the same string. Bienvenue à React et à React i18next. That is exactly what it says. Once again, I am fluent in French and I'm very proud of it. Great. So now we have this working. This is kind of your success case, if you will. Let me show you what happens when things don't work, because chances are, if you're going to be using this in your own React applications, especially if it's your first time working with this, you're probably going to do something wrong and it's not going to work and you're not going to know why. So having this in the video might just help you out. So first, let's come back here to our actual configuration, and let's say that we have a language that is invalid. So let's just add an extra R over here to represent a language that is invalid and that we don't even have inside of our resources over here. If I do this and I save, and now I go back to the actual application, we see the actual string that we passed for our translation, right? Remember, that is the string that we pass over here. We see that directly on the screen. When you give i18next and React i18next a translation string or something that doesn't really result in anything, so there's no actual valid string it can look up and actually present, it is going to give you the actual welcome message over here. So if you ever see this in your React application, it means that somewhere along the line has went wrong, and you need to trace the step to see if you have any typo and if everything is set up correctly. Now, one thing that you can do to actually prevent this is inside of the init over here, inside of this object, you can actually provide a fallback language that is going to get used if this language is actually not supported and results in an error. And you do it like this. You do fallback LNG, and then you can pass it here en like so, right? And even Copilot knows that it's going to use en if the detected language is not available. This can happen. If you save this, even though we have an actual invalid language over here, we come back and we have the English translation, right? You can do this with any language. We could have put here FR if FR is our fallback language, and it's going to default to FR, right? You want to make sure that the language that you put in here, you control, and it's actually a valid language, whereas this language might come from the browser and might not be something that you support. In that case, it's going to use this fallback language over here. Great. So now with that, let's come here and let's change our fallback language to en and actually put the language to FR. And for the rest of this video, we're just going to do everything in French. And if something goes wrong, we're just going to fall back to English. And that way we'll know if we did something wrong. Now, what happens if in your actual component, you have a typo inside of this string over here? So let's come here, let's add an extra E over here. And now we have this string that doesn't match any single key inside of this object for any language. If we go here to our application, we're again going to see the actual string that we put with the typo over here. So with these two E's, what React i18next is going to do is, because in this key, right, in any language, in French, in English, or even in the backup language, the fallback language, there is no actual key that matches the string over here. It's just going to put the string, and it's on you to actually deal with it and correct the typo in your string. And this is something that you have to be careful about, because if you are using strings like this, it's very easy to actually make a mistake, or even worse, you actually go and you change these objects over here, the keys over here, but you forget to actually change the string. It's going to break your translations, and that's going to be difficult to actually find. Usually what people do, what I've seen people do, and even I've done in some applications, is you create some sort of object somewhere, some sort of constant that has all of these translation keys, and then you just use that object instead. That is going to reduce a little bit the chances of making a typo like this. But if you're using strings, or if you're working in a project that just uses strings, it's on you to be careful to always make sure that you have the correct string to actually get the correct translation in your application. Cool. So now with this, we can move on to another topic that you're probably going to also run into as you're translating all of your strings in your React application. And that is the concept of pluralization. How do you have a string that is aware of some sort of count, some sort of value, and knows when it's singular or when it's plural without having to write all of that logic yourself inside of some component or some function in your code? So let's come back here to our configuration where we have the actual languages, and let's change our welcome message to now have to require some sort of value and use that as a singular or a plural. So I can come here, I can remove all of this, and we can do something like you have, and then I'm going to put a placeholder here. So X notifications like So now we have this welcome message, which has this X over here that should be a number. We need a way to pass this number from our component so that React i18next can handle the plural and the singular case. If you have 0 notifications or 1 notification or 2 notifications, we should have a different string over here, mostly by the donation of this S over here. In some cases, the S is going to be there. In other cases, it's not. And the way that you can do this inside of React i18next is by using a count variable. And this is how you do it. You come here, you replace your actual value with curly braces, and then you pass here count. This always has to be count. It has to be called count because that is how this works. You can't pass anything else. You can't pass value, you can't pass number, you can't pass amount. You have to pass a count variable from inside of your code. And now this string specifically, we're going to have this be the plural version of our translation string. So in this case, this should work for 0 notifications. So you have 0 notifications. It should work for 2 notifications. You have 2 notifications. And any other number that is bigger than 1 or 0. This is not going to work for 1 notification because that is not going to have an S. So if this is going to be the plural, what we have to do is come here and do an underscore and then do other like so. This is going to tell React i18next that this string, when it receives a count that has a value of 0 or greater than 1, it is going to use this version because this is the plural version. And then to get the singular version, we're just going to take this entire thing, come here, and instead of other, we're going to do 1 like so to signify that there's only going to be 1 of them. And because this is now the singular version, here we're going to actually remove this S over here so that we can have you have 1 notification. And then as long as we pass a count with some sort of value from our code, this translation string is either going to show the singular version or the plural version based on the actual count that we provided. So now let's actually take these strings and copy them and put them here in the French. And I'm going to do my best and I'll prove to you that I'm actually fluent in French. So here I'm going to say vous avez, and then notification. It's actually the same way that you write it in English and French. I believe, I really hope that I'm right. So I think this should be correct. And here we're just going to do the same thing over here. Vous avez. And by the way, if you know French, I'm using the formal version over here because usually you would do that in an application. I think I haven't used that many React applications in French, but let's just go with that. So there we go. We have the same key over here, 1 and other, and now we have the French translations. So now if we first save and actually provide a count over here, this should work exactly as we expect. So let's come here, and as a second argument to this function, we can actually pass some values, and here we can do count and we can do 1, for example. So now this should give us notification without an S. Let's come here to our application, and there we go. Vous avez une notification, right? Une notification. You have 1 notification, right? Let's just see again to prove this to you. Let's put EN as our language. And now you see you have 1 notification. There we go. And now we can all understand what is actually going on. If you go back here to our code and now change this to 0, for example, we're going to see that you have 0 notifications with an S. The plural is correctly getting inferred. If you come here and put any number that is greater than 1, but not 1 itself, or 0, there we go. It says you have 2 notifications. This is how you do it, right? You just provide this count value, which again, can be anything. You can provide any value that you want in here. It just has to be provided as the actual count, and that is going to work if you also set 1 over here and other. This is the actual notation that React i18next requires. You're going to get plurals and singulars, and it's just going to work. And this is how you do it. You put all of this inside of an object, and you have your translation strings like so, and you support plurals and singulars, and there you go. Great. So now with this, there's one more thing that I want to show you that is really important. And once again, you are going to run into this as you're building and translating your React applications. And it's so much better that you learn this now instead of spending and wasting all of that time later on trying to figure out this component. Because trust me on this component that I'm going to show you now is not intuitive. And you're better off watching it here than spending hours trying to figure it out, reading through the documentation and not understanding it because it is not intuitive. So let me come here to our app component, and let's first get rid of this useTranslation hook because we're not going to be using it, and let's get rid of this. And now let's say that I had this string to translate. So let's put back the welcome message. We're going to say welcome. And then we're going to put here, let's say the username, but we want to put it inside of a bold tag like so. And we're going to put name or just user like so, right? And we're going to put exclamation mark over here. What if we wanted to translate this string and we also wanted to keep this bold over here or whatever else it might have been? Could have been italic, could have been underlined, whatever else it might have been. We want to translate this entire thing and also keep the bold or whatever element that we had. How would we do that? Well, unfortunately, if you tried to use the useTranslation hook that we had earlier, it wouldn't work because it doesn't support it. To do this, you have to use another component from React i18next, and that is going to be the trans component. So over here, you're going to come here to latest, and here we're going to look at the trans component. This is another component that allows you to have translations as well, but it allows you to actually translate things that are a little bit more complicated like this, right? When you have elements within an actual string that you want to keep, but still have the entire string around it actually translated, you would use the trans component. And right, you can see here in the documentation, we actually have an example of exactly what we're trying to do. We have this string over here that says hello, and then we have strong over here, and then also a title over here that says this is your name. We might want to also translate that title, and then an actual variable for the name from person over here. This is the object, and then we also have you have count unread messages over here. We want to essentially translate all of this and keep all of this formatting along with the link and have everything translated over here. This string have it translated, this title have it translated, this value doesn't need to be translated because that is the actual name of the person, you don't translate a name, and then the count over here should handle plurals. We're not going to do something that complicated because this is quite a lot. We're just going to try to translate this simple string which just has a bold tag over here. So as you can see in the documentation, it's telling us to use the trans component, which we can import from React i18next. And then we just use the trans component. We pass it the i18next key. This is going to be the key in our translation object. And then we pass it the actual raw untranslated string with all of these different elements. And inside of our actual string, we do something that looks a little bit confusing. We're actually using one over here. So like as a tag, we're using one, we're closing the one tag. Then we're using 5 over here and we're closing the 5 tag, and this is our actual translation strings. What's going on? Well, first, let's take it slow and start one step at a time. Let's first start by importing the trans component from React i18next. So I'm going to take this over here, come back here to our code, come here at the top of the file, and we're going to import this component. Then we're going to do, as the documentation says, just wrap this actual string inside of the component and pass it a key as our actual value. That's the only thing that we're going to do. So we're going to come here and do trans. Like this, we're going to wrap our string like so, and then we're going to pass it i18next, and I believe it's key like so, and that is going to be a string, which is going to be the welcome message like so, and we're not going to pass it with any plural or singular, we're just going to pass welcome message like so. Then inside of our configuration over here, we're actually going to want to change this to match what we're trying to translate over here. We're no longer going to have any plurals. We're going to keep things simple. So I'm going to remove this over here. I'm going to remove the one, and I'm just going to say, what is the text over here? It's going to say welcome user. I'm going to copy this entire thing and paste it over here inside of this translation string. Now, here's the very confusing part. So the first confusing part is that you're supposed to use this while still having the official untranslated full string inside of your code. I don't particularly like this. I feel like this could have been done a little bit better. There's probably a reason why they chose to do it this way, which is totally fine. But I don't like the fact that I cannot just use this key over here. I have to still keep the actual translation string along with all of the bold and anything else I might have in my code base raw untranslated. It is what it is. We have to work with this. So you just have to get used to it, even though it is a little bit confusing. The second thing is that in here, we can actually not use the B directly. It doesn't work like that. We have to change this to something else. And in this case, I believe, because even I still get confused, we have to actually change this to a 1 like so, and then change this to a 1 like so. And if I do this, let me just try and copy this and paste it here in the French as well. And here we can say bonjour like so. Let's see what happens in our actual code, in our actual app. There we go. So this works, right? We have welcome over here, and then user, if you can tell, is an actual bold. If I just come here and maybe change this to an I for italic, like so, and now we get to see that user is an italic, and this is actually working. But what is going on with this? What happened? What is going on with this 1 over here? Why do we have to put 1 and instead of B? Why can we just not put B or I or whatever? Why is there 1? Well, that's because of the second confusing thing about using the trans component is the way that it actually breaks apart these different things. So for example, let's say that we want to put something else like test over here, and test should be I as well, right? You're going to put this here, we're going to put this at the end, and now we're actually going to do the same thing here. Let's see, we have test after, so let's just make a space over here. Let's come here. If I did that and I put one as well, right? One as well, and here the same, let's do that. Close this and put one as well and one as well. What is going to happen is we're actually going to get, yes, correctly, we're going to get test over here as italic and user as italic, but this is actually wrong. It's incorrect, and the only reason why it's incorrect is because we used both I's over here. What if instead I was to put B, like so, right? I put a B over here for bold. Test is still going to be italic and not bold. What's going on? This happens because, again, of how trans actually takes this entire string over here and breaks it up into multiple parts. So what it does over here is it takes this entire string with all of the components and it breaks it up into an array of multiple parts. And what you're specifying over here is actually the index in that array where that component is that is supposed to actually get used. So in this case, we're specifying 1, which is the first position in the actual index in the array, which is going to be the second position, right? Because arrays are 0 index based, so 1 is going to be the second position. And here what we've done as well is we also specified 1 as well. So this should also take whatever value is in the second position, the array number 1 position of the array. Which in our case, if you look at the string, this is how it does it. So it's first going to take this part over here of the string until the first very element. That is going to be position 0 over here. So right here, this is going to be position 0. Then we're going to have this piece of code over here, the actual element, and I believe it's going to go all the way up to here. That is going to be position 1. So in your actual translation string, whatever you want to translate over here has to be position 1, which we've correctly put here, position 1. Then it's going to take this piece of code over here, this actual exclamation mark and the space next to it, and that is going to be position 2, index number 2. And then we have this over here, which is going to be position 3, index 3, which is the bold, which is incorrect in our string because here we still said 1. So if we instead change this to 3 from 1, sorry, so let's put 3 over here and let's put 3 and do the same thing for the French over here. Now what we should have is we should actually have the bold over here and not the italic, because this now correctly represents the actual position of this part of the string in the actual array. I know this is confusing. I'm also confused myself, as you can probably tell. I'm making a ton of mistakes trying to explain this, but this is how it works. It takes your string with all of the components, it breaks it apart into an array of different positions, and you're using the index. So it's on you as a developer to actually figure out and do the math, and you can actually look at the documentation. They explain this a little bit as to how they actually do it. I believe it's somewhere over here, right? They probably do it. They do it. I've seen it. It's up to you to actually manage that yourself and place these values yourself, which means that if you ever change this translation string, you have to make sure that you recompute manually in your head the actual indexes over here. Otherwise, it's not going to work and you're actually going to have something that you don't expect, right? Again, it is a little bit unfortunate. This is how it currently is. We have to work with it and there's no other way around it unless you want to use something else, which I'm not aware that there is something else for internalization that is as good as i18next. So if you're going to want to use the trans component, which theoretically you shouldn't use it all the time. Usually the use translation hook that we had before is more than enough for most use cases. But in the case where you actually have things like this, where you have components inside of a string that you want to keep around, you're going to want to use the trans component, and that is the way that you have to do it. Unfortunately, we just have to get with it. I really hate in my own React applications when I have to use this, because again, I have to keep this entire string like this untranslated. I have to use this, and then I have to use all of this weird logic in here to actually get my components to work as I want, which again, I don't want to do, but it is what it is. And finally, as a bonus, I'm going to show you something very quickly, just because you stuck around until this part of the video. As you can see here in this comment, it's telling you that you shouldn't put all of your languages inside of JavaScript, and even less so inside of the same file. Usually, you want to have a separate file for each language that could be JSON. We're actually going to do this in JSON, because usually you're going to send that file to someone, to a translator that is going to be able to translate the strings, and you don't want them to have to go inside of JavaScript code just to figure out where they should actually put their translations. translations. So what I would do is I would come in here inside of the utos folder, and actually what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call this one i18n like so, and this is a great example of refactoring code. Initially, we put this as a standalone file, the i18n file, inside of the utos folder because that was enough for our use cases at the time. But now we actually want to have more files that are related to i18n, and they should go in the same folder and not just pollute directly this utos folder. So in that case, we're now going to create a folder and we're going to do some light refactoring, which is very normal in a normal process of building a React application. And you're getting to see a great example of this in this video. So inside of here, I'm actually going to move this file directly, and I'm going to rename this. Instead of i18n, let's just update the import. Instead of i18n, I'm just going to do index. That way I don't have to change my actual import in my code over here. I can still import the same thing, even though I've put this now in its own separate file. And then what I want to do is I want to make here a new folder. Usually we call this locales, like this. And then you're going to want to make a new folder for each language that you support. In this case, we're going to do en, and then we're also going to do another one for fr, like so. And inside of here, you're going to create two files, one for each language, that are going to hold the actual translation strings in JSON format for each specific language. So for example, for English, we're going to do here n.json, like so. And then we're going to do the same thing for French, fr.json, like so. And then over here, we're just going to take this object over here and actually paste this directly as an object inside of JSON. And here we actually have to put double quotes to everything because it is JSON. So let me do exactly that. And there we go. We're going to take all of this, come here to the actual French, and here we're just going to do bonjour, like so. And now we have the same thing for French. And now instead of actually doing it this way, what we're going to want to do is we're just going to want to come here at the top, and we're going to want to do import en-lang from, let's do locale/en/en.json, and we're going to do the same thing for French. We're going to do import fr-lang from locales fr.json, and here we're just going to pass en-lang, and then we're going to pass fr-lang. And now we have our translations in a separate file. Once again, you can send this to a translator, just this file itself. He or she is going to know exactly, and it's going to be a lot easier for them to work in this as opposed to working inside of this file. And everything is going to work exactly as we had it before. So there you go. Congratulations. You can now go on your journey to actually convert your React application into multiple languages and make it accessible to anyone across the globe, no matter what language that they speak. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more tutorials just like this one, make sure to leave this video a big thumbs up. You can also click here to subscribe, or you can click here to watch a different video of mine that YouTube seems to think that you're really going to enjoy. And with that being said, my name has been Darius Kozlan. This is Kozlan Solutions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.